EU/graduate programs.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Ian Martinez.
And I'm Steve Inskeep. More than half of all farm workers hired in the United States are from Mexico. They come to the U.S. and back again on temporary work visas. In some states, farm workers are on the COVID vaccine priority list, which gives them easier access to vaccines than they would get at home. Harvest Public Media's Dana Cronin reports.
White vans carrying small groups of farm workers drive up periodically to the parish hall at St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Cobden, Illinois, dropping off groups of men who have recently arrived from Mexico. Many of them will be here until October on temporary agricultural work visas. And on only their third day here, they're getting vaccinated. 34-year-old Jorge Feria just arrived from Oaxaca, Mexico. Moments after receiving his shot, he felt relieved.
Nosotros we have the fortune to come work in Alaska. We have a government that cares about the people that come to work.
He says if he had stayed in Mexico, he wouldn't be vaccinated. In fact, he doesn't know anyone in Mexico who has yet gotten the shot. It's a big deal for many of these workers. Farm workers have been hit particularly hard by the pandemic. According to researchers at Purdue University, the U.S. alone is estimating that hundreds of thousands of agricultural
statewide news, to Line 1 Your Health Connection, to the offerings through PBS such as Masterpiece or PBS NewsHour. There's something for everybody there.
Agreed. Thanks, Karen, for your membership support and your work for the community on our board.
Thank you. It's an honor to serve such an important organization.
And for those of you listening today, if you'd like to become a member, call or text GIVE to 550-8484 or go to our website, alaskapublic.org today. And thanks.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm A. Martinez. Can America exist without racism? 200 years ago, the editors of the country's first abolitionist newspaper, The Emancipator, asked a different question. Can America exist without slavery?
How they could imagine a nation without slavery at a time when slaveholders were among the richest and most powerful people in the world. It was their imagination. It was their calling forth the impossible that inspires me to this day.
That's Ibram X. Kendi. He's a historian and the founding director of Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research. He says that the vision from 1820 is at the heart of his center's partnership with Meena Venkatraman, who is the editorial page editor at the Boston Globe. They're working together to revive the Emancipator. Together, they want to use the legacy of the paper to work toward an anti-racist future.
We wanted to draw a line from the rich newspaper tradition of the 19th century in Boston, which really served to accelerate the movement for abolition of slavery in the United States, and try to draw a line with today's conversations that are so needed on racial justice.
And during its original run, as you mentioned, the Emancipator was an abolitionist newspaper referring to the movement to end slavery around the world. Ibram, in 2021, what is an abolitionist newspaper?
An abolitionist newspaper recognizes that racism today is slavery yesterday. An abolitionist newspaper recognizes that in order for this nation to truly live up to its professed ideals of liberty and equality for all, it must end racism, just as yesterday it had to end slavery. An abolitionist newspaper knows that there are many different perspectives on how we achieve equality and how we achieve justice, and so bringing together research and scholars and opinion journalists to debate these issues, think about a world anew, is what the Emancipator will do today.
So, Ibram, could we call the Emancipator in 2021 anti-racist journalism?
I think so, because I think anti-racist journalism presupposes that there should be this sort of journalistic effort towards equality and justice.
Many newsrooms around the country have struggled to deal with editorial racism, things like what stories are chosen, how they're framed. And, you're the editorial page editor at the Globe, so why isn't this a part of that newsroom?
Well, in a way it will be. This is the partnership between Globe Opinion, our opinion team at the Boston Globe, and the Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research. And part of what we want to do is build on these rich newspaper traditions of the 19th century in Boston and bring them into the fold of what the Boston Globe is doing and to reach new audiences with our journalism. Boston obviously has a mixed history when it comes to issues of race and racism,
of each other till we both turn blue. Then we'll whistle and go fishing in a year. Let's go fishing.
John Prine, Jerry Jeff Walker, Tony Rice, Billy Joe Shaver, Justin Towns Earl, Adam Schlesinger, and more are remembered this week in a special Mountain Stage memorial to artists who left us in 2020. It's all on the next Mountain Stage.
Saturday at 9 p.m. here on Alaska Public Media, FM 91.1.
Good morning. Large numbers of Central American migrants create an early challenge for a new president. President Biden wants more money to address problems in the migrants' home countries. How would that work? It's Morning Edition from NPR News. What's behind an alarming trend of women under the age of 40 developing liver disease? I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Ian Martinez. Coming up, marine scientists want the Biden administration to make protecting our oceans a priority. Also, the biggest problem Black Americans have with the coronavirus vaccine is getting access to it. This hour, we examine the racial disparities and systemic racism behind who has received the shot. It's Thursday, March 18th. Queen Latifah is 51. The news is next.
Live from NPR News, I'm Corva Coleman. The white man charged in the killing of 8 people in the Atlanta area on Tuesday has yet to make his first formal court appearance. Robert Long is accused of slaying 1 man and 7 women, most of Asian descent. Authorities have not said whether they will bring hate crimes charges against him, but activists say that the targeted businesses are owned by Asians. The House Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing today to address the rise of violence and discrimination against Asian Americans. NPR's Windsor Johnston has more.
The panel is looking at ways to prevent hate crimes against Asian Americans. Some lawmakers are proposing legislation designed to improve hate crime reporting and establishing a national day to speak out against anti-Asian American hate. Racially motivated attacks against Asian Americans have surged since the outbreak of the coronavirus, which experts believe originated in China.
NPR's Windsor Johnston reporting. Stocks opened mixed this morning as the Labor Department reported an uptick in new state claims for unemployment benefits. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose about 10 points in early trading after closing at a record high on Wednesday.
770,000 people filed new state claims for unemployment last week. That's 45,000 more than the week before. But claims under a special federal program for gig workers and the self-employed dropped sharply to 282,000. Federal Reserve officials say the job market is improving more quickly than they expected 3 months ago. But they caution there's still a long way to go to reach full employment. The Fed now expects the jobless rate to fall to 4.5% by the end of this year, though that doesn't necessarily account for millions of people who dropped out of the workforce. The central bank renewed its promise to leave interest rates near zero for an extended period until the economy recovers. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The Kremlin is reacting angrily to President Biden's comment that he thinks he's...
A year plus of pandemic life, and many of us have become obsessed with music, TV shows, memes, the recipes we make each day, the things that keep us going. The team at Planet Money is even obsessed with economists.
Oh my God, Rush is here? No way.
Our pandemic obsession, next time on It's Been a Minute from NPR.
Saturday at 11 a.m. on Alaska Public Media, FM 91.1.
Support for Alaska Public Media comes from members like you and from Alaska Rock Gym, offering gift cards and punch cards online delivered electronically. No gym visit required. Updates on offerings at alaskarockgym.com.
Perkins Coie, addressing the legal needs of innovative companies and industry leaders in Alaska and throughout the world. Perkins Coie, counsel to great companies.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Martinez in Culver City, California.
And I'm Steve Inskeep in Washington, D.C. Good morning. What can the United States really do about Central American asylum seekers heading north? Listen carefully to a single sentence in the news and you get a clue how hard it might be. The oft-repeated sentence is, numbers of migrants have climbed to their highest monthly levels since 2019. Highest since 2019. To critics of President Biden, that means his policies are attracting people. But when we say the highest since 2019, that means there was a similar surge during the Trump administration, despite its separation of children from their families and turning away asylum seekers at the border, among other things. The new administration hopes to focus instead on solving the problems that cause people to migrate. So let's talk about that with Carrie Kahn, NPR's correspondent in Mexico City, and Franco Ordonez, NPR's White House correspondent. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Carrie, the president is telling people to stay where they are for now. How realistic is it that migrants are going to listen to that?
Sure, that's a tough ask. Look, migrants are listening to human smugglers who are making all kinds of promises of getting them into the U.S. They're listening to relatives that are already in the U.S. who can tell them about whether they can get jobs. And mostly they're listening to their daily reality. Remember, in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, you're already dealing with high levels of violence, gangs, grinding poverty. Then 2 hurricanes hit the region, and now this year of the pandemic. I talked to Jose Aquino, who works for the U.S. charity Mercy Corps in Guatemala, and he was telling me about families devastated by the hurricanes, crops flooded, livestock dead, savings, any savings they had wiped out. Then the pandemic hit, people lost jobs, and during these long lockdowns, he said everyone knows it's a huge risk to try and get to the U.S.
Sin embargo, la misma presión económica, creo yo, está haciendo que la gente...
But he says the economic pressures people are facing are just so great that in the case of Guatemala, people are willing to risk it, especially to send their children to what they hope will be a better future.
Well, Franco, what is the president proposing to do over time?
Well, he's trying to resurrect a strategy that he tried near the end of the Obama administration. At that time, they earmarked $1 billion for police training, judicial reforms, and other projects to these 3 Northern Triangle countries. The Trump administration cut a lot of that aid, though spending did increase later on. Now, Biden is seeking $4